James asked me to do a little talk at Develop, and I gave a 3-minute pitch about everyone hates us, but we should care. Because of social acceptance. And he's asked me back, or they've asked me back, to talk a little bit more about what I was talking about. So who am I? So most people know me for skills, but I have made around 300 games. People gloss over that bit. So for console, PC and mobile, I started on SNES and Mega Drive, worked my way through to PS5, Series X and S, and even some stuff on Switch. But I've also worked in games education, diversity and mental health. The OBE you saw earlier, that came from the work I've done in games education, particularly with Next Gen Skills Academy, and the work I bang on about diversity. And I will always bang on about diversity. I was also the interim CEO of Safe in Our World, the games mental health charity. For me, particularly in the production roles I've done, mental health is really important. Not often talked enough about, and how it fits in with the culture of game studios in particular. I've worked for quite a lot of companies in my 30 years, and 6 of those British companies either don't exist anymore or are now French, American, Japanese or Swedish. And that's great. And even Nokia got bought. And who would have thought when I went to work for Nokia the first time and the second time that they would have been bought? They were real giants. And only one of those still remains, and that are still British. They were Kuju, they're now Curve. They're in the room next door with quite a lot of people doing a round table, but even they're owned by North Edge. And part of the reason for doing this talk is I'm really passionate about the British games industry and what we can do and the talent that sits within the UK and how we can export everything that we do around creativity. And we're not particularly good at that, and I think all of us together can work at being a lot better. So what do I do now? So I run a consultancy called Skillful. I'm working on a UK games industry skills research project. Anyone who's seen Colin McDonald's data over the last sort of 12 months can see the skills crisis that's brewing. I've worked out that we had at least 10,000 job ads last year for roles. That's about 50% of our workforce. So there's a load of stuff going on there that we really need to understand. I'm also working with Warner Brothers Discovery and Rocksteady on their new Games Academy. Work with the Prince's Trust, Next Gen Skills Academy and PlayStation. I coach some games developers, some of who are here today. And I try and give developers access to apprenticeships. I think apprenticeships are amazing and we are rubbish at using them. The thing that's most amazing about them is they're written by the industry, but they also come with government funding. The government takes money away from us in the apprenticeship levy, and then it gives it back to us if we take on apprentices. And we look to do the training. And we've not been particularly good at working out how to access that money. And why do I call my business Skillful? Well, as an industry, we're really good at looking at the knowledge that we have and how we can use that knowledge. When people go for jobs, people say, well, have you done the job before? Yeah, okay, why don't you come and do it for me? Rather than looking at the skill, the ability to use that knowledge, the aptitude you may have to utilise that skill. And that's what I think we need to focus on a little bit more. So everyone hates us. Well, they don't actually hate us, but they're not that keen on us, particularly mainstream media. So this just came over from the last month. There's The Sun talking about a mum's guilt at finding her son in a trance at 2 a.m, hooked on a game console, and she felt it was her fault. We've got The Mirror talking about a mum banning her son, who's 12, from an adult game. Well, I must admit, I agree with the mum. Shouldn't be playing it. But it's a story in The Mirror. Really? Really? Do we not have a story about games doing something good? It's always games being bad. And The Guardian, the bastion of great journalism about games, some of our best stories. And this is a cut from their culture page. And that's us. That little tiny red dot, that's the games bit on the culture page. That's us there. And it was talking about women in GTA 5, wasn't even talking about the leak. So it's like, well, hang on a minute. Why aren't these guys really embracing us? Oh, still rubbish at using this. But actually, do we really need them? Look, we've just heard from Mitsu. Twitch, we're brilliant, massive. We're all over the place. We've got YouTube. We've got Discord. We've got our places. We're fine, thank you very much. We're hugely successful. We talk loads about how much we're bigger than music, film, TV. We make these huge global revenues. They're played by 3 billion people, or they will be. The average gamer is 34. They own their own house. They're proper, you know, they own their own house, they've got kids, they've got a normal life. Isn't that amazing? And actually, the average age of someone buying a game is 36. Well, that's not much different from the person playing it. They're not all kids. So that's all right. And parents, 67% of them are playing video games with their children, at least once a week. Brilliant, we're part of the family. Isn't that great? We don't need to reach outside of this little area we're in because we're absolutely fine. Or do we? So we've got a skills crisis. We still lack diversity in our workforce. Our audience really struggle with being a gamer. We lack diversity in our content. Come on, we know we do. And we haven't really got started on interactivity. So yes, I'm going to bang on about the skills crisis because I'm writing a report, but there are 10,000 jobs advertised last year. So that's a huge majority of those jobs were at mid to senior level. So we do a lot of work talking about graduates and how do graduates get into the industry, but we don't talk about I was going to say older generation, but that's not really fair. But the people with 5 to 10 years experience. Someone quoted the other day, and I can't find out where the data came from, that your career in the industry on average is going to be 5 years long. Well, hang on, where are those guys going? They're not coming back. What are we doing? Are we pushing them all out? Don't we need them back? Where did all those women go? Because we used to have quite a lot of women. We have women at lower levels, but none at senior level, or very few. So where have they gone? Wages are spiralling. We know that. We know that we've created a merry-go-round of mid to senior jobs. I talk to developers and publishers who are paying 10, 20, 30k to keep people because they know they can't fill those jobs. And they know they've got to pay tens of thousands of pounds to fill that role. It's a real problem. So that bottom line is beginning to get out of control. We're still struggling with toxicity crunch, anxiety and depression. There's a figure there that anxiety and depression levels are twice as high as the English average. That came from the UK census. So we're at 38% in the industry compared to 17% in the English average. That's not in the workforce, that's across the population. But why is that? Are we a safe place for people with anxiety and depression? Or are we causing the anxiety and depression? We don't know. And that's quite scary. So we've got a skills crisis. Is our sector growth being limited by our access to talent? Well, of course it is. We've got 10,000 jobs out of a workforce of 20,000. We're just creating a merry-go-round. Our HR departments are just continually looking for new people. Are they developing staff or are they just looking for new people? To go back to my question earlier to Rare about AAA, and thank you very much for that answer that they gave, that they will look at whether they're asking for AAA experience or not. But I think a lot of AAA games developers are only considering other people who've worked in AAA. It's really hard, or we find it hard, to engage with career changers, to look at people's talent and skill rather than their actual knowledge. Have they done the job before? Have they worked in the games industry before? But it's okay, because 20% of our workforce come from the EU. So we'll just get more people from the EU, more people from outside the UK. We don't really have a problem. We can solve it. Brexit's made it a little bit harder, but we're all right. We can work remotely. Really, it's not a problem. Education doesn't really work for us. So we did the Next Gen Skills Report in 2013, and we got computer programming on the curriculum. Brilliant, it's into schools. Now we're sorted. Oh, hang on a minute, Art GCSE, what are they doing? Well, they're drawing on paper, they're doing a bit of painting. That's really good, and that's kind of the fundamentals of what we do, but hang on a minute, now we've got to teach them how to do digital art. Well, hang on, maybe you were turned off by art and doing 2D art and painting and stuff, and you wanted to do graphics art, but maybe that wasn't an opportunity for you at school because we're so focused on fine art, but that's not a job. Music's all about instruments because that's how you learn music, isn't it? You're in an orchestra. Oh, does that help our audio people? Really? Does it? Is that training them for the jobs that we've got and so many of? English, at least, that's okay. It's got a bit of storytelling. That'll work. That's our narrative side sorted. Or is it? Really, is it? So how are we going to make this huge fundamental shift in education to sort out our talent pipeline? Workforce diversity. So UK Census, or UK Census, says that 30% of the workforce is women. If you have but don't forget that's 30% of the people who filled in the survey to show how diverse we are. And of course I'm one of those people that fill in the survey because I think it's really important that my representation is felt. But actually, am I overcounting me? So actually, if you look at the gender pay gap report, it indicates there's only about 18% of women in the industry. And that's 18% of women in really big companies. And I have a guess that small companies have a lot less women. So I think it's probably less than 18%. And when I started to look at the stats about women in games, we were at 20% in 2000. So hang on a minute, here we are 22 years later, and we're probably 2% down. But it's all right, because 45% of the UK gamers are women. So it's okay, it doesn't matter that we don't have any women in the workforce, because actually women play the games anyway. So we're sorted. And 48% of people who play a game identify as female, while excuse me, 29% of people of colour. So we also don't have to worry about whether they're represented in our workforce. I'll try and talk slightly less quickly. So, are we happy then to identify as a gamer? Well, only 6% of women will identify as a gamer, but only 15% of men. So actually our consumers aren't that comfortable with being our consumers. Well, hang on a minute, surely that's a bit of a problem. But aren't we hugely successful? Don't we make loads and loads of money? But actually our consumers aren't comfortable to be identified as our consumers. And then the Mental Health Foundation did a report last year, and I was part of the study, and it was fascinating. But players felt a sense of guilt or shame based on a perception that society didn't see their hobby as being worthwhile. Shame. So our consumers don't identify with being gamers, and they feel shame at playing our product. Now, this to me is hugely worrying, because other people think that gaming is unproductive, a waste of time. No one would say that about books. People haven't said that about TV for a while, but they're still happy to say that about games. So, but we're still doing all right, aren't we? Doesn't matter that they feel a little bit of shame, because they'll get over it, and eventually society will change and everything will be fine. So what can we think further afield about people of influence? So let's talk about politicians, and let's play a little bit of politics. So Greenstone Research did a report in 2020 called Ahead of Game, which showed that 39% of MPs think there needs to be more regulation of video games in the video games industry, and only 2% thinks there should be less. I think that's fair enough, to be honest. I've got a lot of thoughts on that, and we've spent way too much time thinking about it. But that report also showed that 56% of references to video games in the UK Parliament had been negative. More than half had been negative about our industry. Well, hang on a minute. That seems a little bit unfair to me. How much do they really know about our industry? But aren't we the powerhouse of creativity? Aren't we the most profitable creative industry out there? But hang on a minute, they're being negative about us and what we do. Now, are they happy to be a gamer? So Alex Sobel, MP, so he chairs the all-party parliamentary group on video games and esports. So he's our champion. And yes, he plays Civ 6, Elite Dangerous. Brilliant. And how do we know that? Because Yuki did an interview with him, and it's on the Yuki website. Perfect. Jonathan Gullis. So he's Mr. Silicon Stoke. He wants to bring the games industry to Stoke. It's going to be amazing. It's going to transform everything. He doesn't identify as a gamer. Owen Thompson lists computer games in his recreations, whatever a recreation is, but it's listed. No more information, but it's in there as something he does in his recreational time. Dehenna, she worked in a video games retailer. I've never met anyone who works in a video games retailer that's not a gamer. There's lots of them working in the industry, but she's not comfortable to put that she's a gamer. Maybe she's not. Bet she is. Lord Ed Vaizey, good old Ed. He was Culture Secretary for over 10 years. He did enormous things from the Next Gen Skills Report to pushing through the video games tax relief. Good old Ed. Still doesn't seem to identify as a gamer. But he's been amazing. We need more people like Ed. Still no gamers. It's a bit worrying. But what did our politicians ever do for us, really? They sorted out the video games tax relief. That's quite good. We get 20% back on our dev costs. That's good. They transformed education with the Next Gen Skills Report. They're the ones that pushed through the old computer programming into the curriculum. They enabled us to set up the Next Gen Skills Academy, which was able to transform education in FE. That was good. They control the shortest occupation list. Those are the people who can come on visas. Well, hang on a minute. Visas, they're about 9k a pop, aren't they? So if I'm going to hire all these people from outside the UK because I can't get talent from inside the UK, that's 9k a pop, but this is going to make it a little bit easier, but it's still going to be quite tricky. Okay, so we probably need them on side for that. They gave us the Skills Investment Fund. That worked well. We got about, I think we got about 7 million out of that. That helped a lot of companies to develop. So it'd be quite good to get that back. They could do with some further education reforms. And by further education, I mean more education reforms. Maybe these are the guys that could change our curriculum. Maybe they're the ones that can create digital art, digital music on the curriculum. That apprenticeship levy I talked about, that where companies who've got a wage bill of over 3 million, they're paying in a percentage every month into that apprenticeship levy. The games industry's got 4 million sat there in the treasury. We can't access. No one's accessing that money. Maybe they can help us access that money to help some of our skills crisis. And the UK Games Fund. I'm a big fan. I would be. I'm an assessor. Anyone who's been for an interview recently saw me for a week talking to them about that. But that's limited to 25k a game. 25k, what can you do for 25k? Well, as it turns out, loads, because I see what the people do. But actually, that's very little money. I think we should be doing a lot more. And other people are doing a lot more. Germany's doing a lot more. They've spybought this space. They've got a major funding program. They're giving up to 50% of development costs to German developers. Well, hang on a minute. If I can't get the talent here, can't I just pop over to Germany? Maybe get access to that funding there? Screen Australia. Sat next to them at an event earlier this year. They're going to give me a grant up to 150,000 Australian dollars per game. That's within a budget of 500,000. Still seems pretty good. Oh, and they're going to give me a tax offset policy. A 30% refundable tax. Doesn't that remind you of Canada? Haven't half my friends moved to Canada because they had a scheme like that? But it's all right. We'll be fine in this country. It doesn't matter that none of our politicians are gamers. It doesn't matter that they always talk negatively about us, because we could go and do it somewhere else. Is there a lack of diversity in our content? If you think about the impact that broadcast had on content, so think at the beginning of TV, the impact that that's had on comedy today, politics, the accessibility of politics because of broadcast, entertainment. Yeah, that's what we think of broadcast for, but actually they've impacted music and sport in ways that we'd never considered. Health and fitness, factual and documentary, and even education. All those were massively impacted by broadcast. Couldn't we do something similar with interactivity? We've done entertainment, well, a niche part of entertainment in games. Have we done sport with e-sport? A little bit, but I think we can do an awful lot more. Health and fitness. Peloton are doing quite a lot, working out communities, but could we do a lot more in that area? Have we really even touched comedy, politics, factual? Imagine what interactivity could do in those areas that games have done for entertainment. This is an area that no one's really considering. But hang on, we're going into recession. Here at Capital, we're talking about how we need to look at the risks, control what we're doing, smaller Smaller bets, perhaps. So who's actually going to put any money into this? Bit radical. Could we have a public service publisher? Now, I'm not going to say that outside of this room, and I'm not going to maybe link that to something like the BBC, because that's dreadfully unpopular. But could it work? Could that, having a funding that enabled us to go into new content, to use the talent in the UK, to deliver this stuff, could that work? Or could we just go back to the Skills Investment Fund? That was nice. That gave us money for new trainees, and that gave us money for training. Or apprenticeship levy. Could we use that outside delivery to make new apprenticeships for us? And when I talk about apprenticeships, what I think is the benefit of apprenticeships is that they're brilliant for upskilling. They're not just for bringing in new people. Don't think of it like a plumbing apprenticeship. We have a level 7, a master's level computer programming apprenticeship, or we have the community manager apprenticeship. I really feel for community managers, they get very little support, whether it's about mental health or about training. And we've written one that comes with funding, and we're not using it. Could we use industry support for sector collaboration? Could we work as a whole industry together to try and solve some of these issues, some of these new areas that we could move into, or some of our skills crisis? Could we have some innovation funding? That tech industry seems to get quite a lot of innovation funding. Broadcast seem to get a lot of innovation funding. VFX gets tons. Where's the games industry innovation funding? So, how can we change the way that we're thinking? How do we get that cut through? How can we get to children, particularly at primary school? We ignore primary school completely, but that's where people start to make the decisions about their careers. How can we get to parents about what we do and it not be negative? Educators, politicians, and mainstream media journalists, because the guys in here, I think you get it. And here are some examples of the people who I think are making a difference. The V&A, doing their video games exhibition. We got in a whole different group of people. We got in families. We got in educators. We got in journalists. Jessica Curry does some brilliant stuff on the radio that's tapping into a different audience. I don't know if anyone saw this month's Cosmo. Maybe not. Jayanne Lopez from Black Girl Gaming and Stephanie Ajono from Ensaga on there, I mean, kicking ass. These ladies look fabulous. And they're talking about blending beauty with games and the work that they're doing, and they're cutting through to a new audience. The BBC Prom, again, we see music coming to the fore on mainstream media and making people think that we actually make proper music. It's not just a bit of beeps and bops in the game. This is proper orchestral music. And I put a little picture in there of my mate Nigel from Meander. He's done an amazing job with Do I Look Like a Gamer? But you'll also notice that the majority of the people here are underrepresented people within the games industry. So the underrepresented groups seem to be pushing hard for a crossover. So I would say to everybody, there is a moment where everybody could do a little bit more to push on how we're perceived, to change those minds of politicians and mainstream journalists, parents and educators. So why am I so passionate about this? Because games talent, I believe, can be found anywhere. Where I started in the games industry, we were a working class industry. People had dropped out of education and they were making their games. Now we've blocked a lot of that talent. Digital deprivation is a huge issue. We saw that in lockdown with the lack of access to both broadband and to hardware. We're massively successful. We know that, but we've kind of sat on that as a laurel. We have huge potential. We have huge regional benefits. We can work remotely. We've got hubs all over the UK. We're not just London-based. We can help mental health, loneliness, human engagement, but we can do so much more. There's a little piece yesterday on Radio 4. I was recovering from the school run when I heard it, talking about PTSD and how they're using Tetris to help people get over flashbacks. Incredible. But even then, it took them ages to get to the understanding that games could be part of a tool, because they already had that prejudice about what games were like as a sector. We know that people are using games in pain management, and we know that people are using games in training. But again, people aren't identifying that this is okay. So, as I finish my little talk with James, imagine a society where politicians were happy to discuss the games they were playing, where they were happy to meet games developers and esports stars in the same way that they're happy to meet film and TV celebrities. Imagine where games were used regularly to support mental health and physical health. It's getting there, but if we were more socially acceptable, I think we'd get there a lot faster. Where games were on the curriculum, where people felt joy about playing games, and that's the one that gets to me most. People should feel joy about playing and discussing games, not feel guilt and shame. And that when you tell somebody what you do, they don't just hold up their hands and apologise for not playing a game. And just to finish, oddly, the people who buy games the least are dentists. So next time you're at the dentist, please tell them to play games. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Gina. That was fantastic. Really great talk. We've run out of time for questions, unfortunately, but if you want to chat to Gina, you're going to be around for the break, aren't you? And coffee and tea and things. So. Yeah, we'll try and find your phone as well. Good stuff. We're now going to have a short, well, about an hour networking break, and tea and coffee is available in the break room.